She sat in the back row of her son's Navy SEAL graduation, alone and unnoticed, dressed like any other parent. But when the Admiral's eyes landed on her neck and caught a glimpse of a hidden tattoo, he froze mid-ceremony. Without a word, he abandoned protocol and walked straight into the crowd, stopping directly in front of her. What he saw was a mark that belonged to operators declared dead 16 years ago. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories like this, please consider subscribing. The entire room was about to learn who this quiet woman really was, and her son had no idea his mother was a ghost. The ceremony grounds at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado stretched wide and flat under the early November sun, bleached white by marine layer fog that had only just burned off. Rows of white folding chairs created perfect lines across the parade deck, filled now with families who had flown in from across the country. Balloons bobbed in the ocean breeze. Children squirmed in stiff church clothes. Girlfriends clutched bouquets wrapped in cellophane, their phones ready to capture the moment their boyfriends officially became Navy SEALs. The air buzzed with anticipation, that particular frequency of pride and relief that comes when something impossibly hard is finally over. Parents spoke in hushed, reverent tones about Hell Week, about the stories their sons had shared in brief phone calls, about the transformation they were about to witness. Some of the fathers wore old service uniforms, pressed and polished, metals clinking softly when they moved. Some of the mothers had tissues already crumpled in their fists. In the very back row, far left corner, a woman sat alone. Reeve Hollins had arrived 20 minutes before the ceremony started, when the staff was still setting up microphones and adjusting the podium height. She chose her seat deliberately, the way someone might choose an exit in an unfamiliar building. She wore a plain gray cardigan over a white shirt and dark jeans, nothing that would catch light or draw attention. Her hair was pulled back in a simple knot, no jewelry except a watch with a black fabric band. She carried a small crossbody purse and nothing else. She did not take out her phone. She did not look around to see if anyone might sit near her. She simply sat with her hands folded in her lap and watched the crowd fill in from the front rows backward, the way water fills a container. Other families arrived in clusters, moving as units, grandparents and siblings and cousins, all orienting around the graduate-like planets around a sun. They saved seats with jackets and programs. They took group photos before the ceremony even started. They called out to other families they recognized from previous events, from the graduation from basic, from the hell of waiting through Bud S training, wondering if their sons would make it through. Reeve sat alone, and no one questioned it. A woman in her 60s, with a bright floral blouse, eventually sat 2 chairs away, leaving one empty seat between them as a buffer. She was the kind of person who made friends easily, who saw silence as something to be filled. She smiled at Reeve immediately. The woman gestured toward the formation area, where the graduates would soon appear. Her eyes were already wet. "My grandson," she said. "He made it through on his first try. 22 years old. Can you believe that? His father tried twice and never got past Hell Week. But this kid, he is something else." Reeve offered a polite smile. "That is wonderful." The woman waited for more. When nothing came, she tried again. "Is this your first time at one of these?" Reeve nodded. "It is." The woman beamed, interpreting this as an invitation. "Oh, you are in for something special. I have been to 3 military graduations now, Army and Marines both, but nothing compares to this. These boys, they are the best of the best. Do you have a son graduating today?" Reeve hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "I do." The woman leaned forward slightly, trying to close the gap Reeve had maintained. "Which one is he? Maybe my grandson knows him." "Third row," Reeve said. "Brown hair." The woman squinted toward the empty formation area, then laughed. "Well, I will keep an eye out. What is his name?" Reeve turned her head slightly, just enough to break the line of conversation without being outright rude. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I need to focus." The woman blinked, smiled uncertainly, and turned back toward the front. She did not try to speak to Reeve again. The ceremony began with the national anthem. Everyone stood. Reeve stood as well, hands at her sides, posture straight but not rigid. She did not place her hand over her heart the way most of the civilians did. She simply stood, eyes forward, while the anthem played over crackling speakers. When it finished and everyone sat, the first speaker took the podium. A captain, whose name Reeve did not catch. He spoke about sacrifice and commitment, about the pipeline that turned ordinary men into warriors, about the legacy they were now inheriting. His words were scripted and smooth, the kind of speech that had been given 100 times before in slightly different configurations. Reeve listened without expression. Then the formation appeared. 47 men in dress-white uniforms marched onto the parade deck in perfect unison, their movements so synchronized they seemed like a single organism. The crowd erupted into applause. Cameras flashed. A few people stood even though they were not supposed to yet. Reeve did not stand. She clapped softly, just enough to blend in. Her eyes found him immediately. Third row, fourth from the left. Ensign Cale Hollins, 23 years old. Lean and angular in a way that made his uniform look almost too big, though she knew it fit perfectly. His face had thinned since she saw him last, 6 months ago when he was halfway through training. The softness in his jaw was gone. His eyes had changed too, harder now, focused in a way that came from being broken down and rebuilt. He looked like his father. Reeve felt something tighten in her chest, but did not let it reach her face. The formation came to a halt. The command echoed across the deck. 47 men moved as one, snapping to attention with a sound like a single footstep. Cale's eyes scanned the crowd during the brief moment before the next command. She watched him search, saw his gaze move across the front rows, then the middle, then finally to the back. When he found her, his expression flickered. Not disappointment exactly, more like confirmation of something he had already expected. She had told him she would be here, but he had not really believed it until now. The ceremony continued. Names were called, the trident was awarded, that small gold pin that meant everything, handed over one by one, with a handshake and a few words Reeve could not hear from where she sat. Each graduate stepped forward, received the pin, returned to formation. The families cheered at different volumes, depending on how loud they were by nature, how much they needed to release the fear they had been holding for months. When Cale's name was called, Reeve clapped, not louder than before, not softer, just the same measured applause she had given all the others. The woman 2 seats away glanced at her, confused, maybe wondering if she had misunderstood which graduate was Reeve's son. Reeve did not notice. She was watching Cale receive his trident, watching the way he shook the officer's hand, watching the way he returned to his place in formation, with his shoulders just slightly straighter than before. She had not seen him earn his high school diploma. She had missed his college graduation because of work she could not explain. But she was here now. That had to count for something. The next portion of the ceremony involved a speech from a senior enlisted SEAL, a master chief with 30 years in and a chest full of ribbons. He spoke about brotherhood and the weight of the trident, about how it was not just a pin but a promise. He told a story about a mission in Ramadi, about a teammate who took a bullet meant for him, about the debt that could never be repaid. Reeve's hands tightened slightly in her lap. The Master Chief finished his speech, and the formation was given another command: parade rest. A slight relaxation, feet apart, hands behind their backs. That was when the inspection began. Rear Admiral Gideon Torch stepped onto the deck from the side entrance, flanked by 2 aides. He was 54 years old, broad-shouldered and graying at the temples, with the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from something harder than flesh. His uniform was immaculate. His ribbons told a story of 3 decades in naval special warfare, of combat deployments that spanned from the Balkans to the Horn of Africa to the mountains of Afghanistan. He was the kind of officer people stood straight around without being told. The crowd quieted as he approached the formation. This was the formal part, the tradition. The admiral would walk the line, inspect the graduates, offer a handshake here and there to someone he recognized or someone whose record had stood out. He started at the left side of the first row, moving slowly, methodically. He stopped in front of one graduate, said something brief, moved on, stopped in front of another, nodded, continued. Reeve watched without particular interest. Ceremonies like this followed patterns. They were predictable, comforting in their rigidity. But then something changed. Admiral Torch finished the first row and moved to the second. He was halfway through when his eyes drifted, just for a moment, toward the crowd, not looking at anyone in particular, just scanning the way people do when their attention wanders. His gaze swept across the front rows, then the middle, then the back, and then he stopped. His body did not freeze exactly. It was more subtle than that. A slight hitch in his stride, a barely perceptible stiffening of his shoulders. His head turned a fraction of an inch more than it should have, his eyes narrowing as if trying to bring something into focus. He was looking directly at Reeve. For a moment, he just stared. Then his jaw tightened. His hand, which had been relaxed at his side, curled into a fist. The officer running the ceremony noticed. He leaned toward one of the aides and whispered something, probably asking if everything was all right. Admiral Torch did not respond. He took a step away from the formation, then another. His eyes never left Reeve. The crowd began to murmur. This was not part of the program. Admirals did not walk away from formations mid-inspection. They certainly did not walk into the audience seating. But that is exactly what he did. He moved with purpose, cutting through the narrow aisle between rows of chairs, his polished shoes making soft sounds against the asphalt. People turned to watch him pass, confused, curious. Reeve's expression did not change, but her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Her shoulders drew back, her hands unclenched in her lap. She knew what was coming. Admiral Torch reached the back row and stopped directly in front of her. He stood there for a long moment, looking down at her with an expression that could have been disbelief or recognition or something in between. The woman in the floral blouse 2 seats away leaned back slightly, eyes wide. The entire ceremony had gone silent, 2,000 people watching. Reeve looked up at him. Her face was calm, composed. Admiral Torch spoke quietly, his voice low enough that only she and maybe the woman 2 seats away could hear. "Ma'am," he said, "may I ask you a question?" It was not really a question. Reeve nodded once. "You can." He crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to her eye level, his voice dropping even lower. "Did you serve with Task Unit Wraith?" Again, not a question, a confirmation. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. No one could hear what was being said, but the body language was impossible to miss. An admiral does not crouch in front of a civilian unless something significant is happening. Reeve held his gaze. She did not look away, did not flinch. And then, slowly, she nodded. Just once. Barely perceptible. Admiral Torch exhaled, a sharp breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but was not a laugh at all. He stood, his hand going to his temple as if steadying himself. He looked at her for another long moment, then turned and walked back toward the podium. His face had gone pale. The officer managing the ceremony stepped forward, concerned. "Sir, is everything all right?" Admiral Torch waved him off. He walked to the microphone, gripped the edges of the podium with both hands. The crowd waited. He cleared his throat. The feedback from the microphone cut through the murmuring and silenced it instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, something strained. "Before we conclude today's ceremony, I need to acknowledge something." He paused, looked out at the crowd, then his eyes found Reeve again. "Sitting among you today is someone I never thought I would see again." Confusion rippled through the audience. In the formation, Cale turned his head slightly, trying to see what was happening, trying to understand why an admiral was talking about someone in the crowd. Admiral Torch continued. "Someone I was told died serving this country 16 years ago." The murmurs stopped. The confusion deepened. She was part of a unit that does not exist in any official record. A unit so classified that their families were told they died in training accidents. Their memorial services were closed casket, no names on the headstones. He was not reading from notes. He was speaking from memory. "Task Unit Wraith," he said, and the name hung in the air like something solid. A unit that ran operations in places this country will never acknowledge. Operations that saved American lives. Operations that required a kind of operator we do not have a name for. In the back row, Reeve sat perfectly still. "She is one of the most decorated soldiers in the history of naval special warfare," Admiral Torch said. "And until 2 minutes ago, I thought she was dead." The silence that followed was absolute. And then slowly, people began to turn, heads swiveling toward the back row, trying to figure out who he was talking about. The woman in the floral blouse stared at Reeve with her mouth open. In the formation, Cale had gone rigid. His face was pale. His hands behind his back were trembling. Admiral Torch stepped away from the podium. He walked back toward Reeve, and this time the crowd parted slightly to let him through. He stopped in front of her again. And then, in full dress uniform, in front of 2,000 people, Rear Admiral Gideon Torch brought his hand to his brow in a sharp, formal salute. If you have ever seen someone receive recognition they spent years avoiding, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And if these kinds of stories matter to you, consider subscribing so we can keep telling them. The salute held for 3 full seconds. Admiral Torch's hand rigid at his brow, his eyes locked on Reeves' face. The sound of the ocean became audible in the silence, waves rolling against the base perimeter 200 yards away. A gull cried overhead. Someone's phone buzzed and was immediately silenced. Reeve did not return the salute. She simply looked up at him, her expression unreadable, and after a moment she gave the smallest nod. A gesture of acknowledgement, nothing more. Admiral Torch lowered his hand slowly. He stood there for another beat, as if he wanted to say something else, but then he turned and walked back toward the stage. His stride was measured, but his shoulders carried a tension that had not been there before. The crowd did not know how to react. A few people clapped uncertainly. Others stayed silent, still trying to piece together what they had just witnessed. On the stage, the officers who had been standing at ease were now rigid. A lieutenant commander near the podium had gone pale. A master chief in the second row was staring at Reeve with an expression that looked like he had just seen something he thought only existed in stories told late at night in berthing compartments. Admiral Torch returned to the podium, but he did not speak immediately. He gripped the edges again, his knuckles white. When he finally looked up, his voice was quieter than before. "That is all I can say about her service," he said. "The rest is still classified. It will stay classified. Some of you may try to look her up later. You will not find anything. That is by design." He paused, his jaw working as if he were physically restraining the words he wanted to say. "But I will tell you this. If even half of you standing in that formation today accomplish a fraction of what she did in the field, this country will be safer for it." He stepped back from the microphone. The ceremony coordinator stepped forward quickly, trying to regain control of the program. He announced the closing remarks, the benediction, the dismissal. His voice was too loud, too fast, like he was trying to move past what had just happened as quickly as possible. But no one was listening. Every eye in the audience was on Reeve, trying to see past the gray cardigan and the simple clothes, trying to reconcile the quiet woman in the back row with the words the Admiral had just spoken. Reeve did not look at any of them. Her gaze was fixed on the formation. On Cale. He was still standing at attention, but his face had crumpled, not in anger, not in confusion, in something deeper, a kind of devastation that comes when the foundation of your understanding shifts and you realize you have been standing on sand the entire time. The ceremony ended. The formation was dismissed. The graduates broke ranks and immediately the crowd surged forward, families rushing to embrace their sons, to take photos, to cry and laugh and hold on to them. Reeve stayed in her seat. She watched as other families swarmed the deck. She watched as Cale stood in the middle of it all, not moving, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found her again. He did not move toward her. He just stared, like he was seeing her for the first time. Around Reeve, people were beginning to approach. A man in his 60s with a Navy veteran cap moved toward her, his hand outstretched, his face full of something like reverence. Before he could speak, a younger man in a suit stepped in front of him, holding up a phone. "Excuse me," the younger man said. "I am a reporter with the Union Tribune. Can I ask you a few questions about your service?" Reeve stood. She slung her purse over her shoulder and stepped around him without a word. She moved quickly but not in a way that drew attention. She knew how to disappear in crowds, but the reporter followed. So did the veteran, and then a woman with a camera, and then 2 more people Reeve did not look at long enough to identify. "Ma'am, please," the reporter said, walking fast to keep up. "Just a few questions. The public has a right to know." Reeve stopped. She turned and looked at him, with the kind of stillness that made him take a step back without realizing why. "No," she said quietly. "They do not." She turned and kept walking. This time, no one followed. She moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency, angling her body to slip through gaps, keeping her head down just enough to avoid direct eye contact, but not so much that she looked like she was hiding. She reached the edge of the ceremony grounds and kept going, heading toward the parking lot, where her truck was parked in the far corner under a tree. Behind her, the noise of the celebration continued. She could hear laughter, could hear someone's father giving a speech about how proud he was, could hear a child asking if they could go to the beach now. Reeve reached her truck, a 10-year-old Toyota Tacoma with a dent in the rear bumper and a faded registration sticker. She unlocked it, climbed in, and sat for a moment with her hands on the steering wheel. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out. 3 missed calls from a number she did not recognize. 2 text messages from Cale sent in the last 5 minutes. The first one said, "Mom, what is happening?" The second one said, "Please do not leave." Reeve stared at the messages. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then she put the phone in the cup holder without responding and started the engine. She did not leave, not yet. She just sat there with the engine running, the air conditioning blowing cold against her face. She had not wanted to come. She had known this was a risk, not because she thought anyone would recognize her. Most of the people who knew about Wraith were dead or retired, but because being here meant breaking the rules she had followed for 16 years. Stay invisible, stay distant. Keep Cale as far from her past as possible. But he had asked her to come 3 times, and the third time, his voice on the phone had been different, quieter, more resigned, like he had accepted that she would say no again. So she had said yes, and now everything she had built, every wall she had carefully maintained, was gone. A knock on the window made her look up. Admiral Torch stood outside her truck, his cover tucked under his arm. He gestured for her to roll down the window. Reeve hesitated, then did. "I need to know how," he said without preamble. "After Kandahar, we swept the entire site. We found 4 bodies, all accounted for. You were listed as the 5th KIA. Reeve looked straight ahead through the windshield. "I was not there." Torch frowned. "The mission brief said 5 operators went in. The brief was wrong. That is not possible." "I wrote the brief." Reeve finally looked at him. "Then you made a mistake." Torch stared at her, his jaw tight. He looked like he wanted to argue, to demand answers, but he also looked like he knew he would not get them. After a long moment, he exhaled. "They told us the unit was compromised," he said quietly. "That there had been a leak. That Wraith was burned and everyone in it was a liability. That part was true. So they declared you all dead, closed the files, erased the records." Reeve nodded, "And you just let them." It was not a question. Reeve turned the air conditioning down so she could hear him better. What was I supposed to do? Come forward and tell them the mission brief was wrong? Tell them I survived when 4 of my team did not? That would have put a target on me. On anyone I had ever been close to. Torch looked away, his expression conflicted. After a moment, he nodded. "I get it, I do. But you have a son. How did you keep him safe? By staying away?" The words hung in the air between them. Torch shook his head slowly. "He is going to have questions." "I know. Are you going to answer them?" Reeve did not respond. Torch let out a long breath. "Look, I can keep the media off you. I can make some calls. But people saw what happened today. They are going to talk, and some of those people have connections. It is going to get out." Reeve looked at him. "Let it." Torch blinked. "What?" "If people want to talk, let them. I am not hiding anymore." She said it like a decision she had just made, but Torch got the sense it was something she had been carrying for a long time. He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but if you need anything, you call me. I mean it." He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it through the window. Reeve took it, glanced at it, then set it in the cup holder next to her phone. Torch straightened, put his cover back on, and walked away. Reeve sat alone in the truck for another 10 minutes. Then she turned off the engine, got out, and walked back toward the ceremony grounds. The crowd had thinned, but there were still clusters of families taking photos near the iconic SEAL Trident statue. Graduates were walking around in their dress whites, shaking hands, hugging people, their faces glowing with the kind of pride that comes from surviving something that breaks most people. Reeve spotted Cale near the edge of the pavilion. He was standing with a few other graduates, but he was not really part of the conversation. He kept looking around, scanning the crowd. When he saw her, he froze. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Cale said something to the other graduates and walked toward her. His stride was stiff, controlled, like he was trying very hard to hold himself together. He stopped a few feet away from her. Up close, she could see that his eyes were red. You were going to leave, he said. It was not a question. Reeve nodded. I was, but you did not. No. Why? Because you asked me not to. Cale let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in his chest for hours. He looked at her, really looked at her, and Reeve saw the moment when his expression shifted, when the image of his mother, the woman who had been distant and vague and impossible to understand, collided with the person the Admiral had described. Is it true, he said, what he said about you? Reeve held his gaze. Yes. Task Unit Wraith. That was real. Yes. And you were part of it. Yes. Cale closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. Why did you never tell me? Reeve felt something crack inside her chest, but she kept her voice steady. Because if the wrong people knew I had a son, they would have used you to get to me, and I could not let that happen. So you just stayed away. You let me think you did not care. I cared, Reeve said, and for the first time her voice wavered. I cared more than you will ever know. That is why I stayed away. Cale shook his head, tears spilling over now. I spent my whole life trying to understand why you were the way you were, why you never came to anything, why you would not talk about your past. I thought maybe you were ashamed of me, or that I reminded you of Dad and you could not handle it. Reeve took a step closer. You never reminded me of your father. Then what was it? I reminded myself of your father, and I could not risk becoming what he became. Cale stared at her. What does that mean? Reeve looked away. Your father was a good man, but he was also an operator. And operators do not get to have normal lives. They do not get to be present. They do not get to be safe. I did not want that for you. So, you became distant instead. Yes, that does not make sense. Reeve looked back at him. It is the only thing that made sense. Cale wiped his face with the back of his hand. The Admiral said you were declared dead. He said there was a memorial service. There was. Did you go? No. Why not? Because I was trying to stay dead. Cale laughed, but it was not a happy sound. This is insane. You know that, right? This whole thing is insane. Reeve did not argue. They stood in silence for a moment. Around them, the celebration continued. Someone set off a champagne bottle, and it sprayed foam across a group of graduates who cheered and shoved each other playfully. A toddler ran past, clutching a balloon shaped like an anchor. Cale looked at her again. What happens now? Reeve considered the question. I do not know. Are you going to disappear again? No. Promise. Reeve met his eyes. I promise. Cale nodded slowly. Then he stepped forward and hugged her. It was stiff at first, awkward, like neither of them was sure how to do this. But then Reeve's arms came up and she held him, and for the first time in 16 years, she let herself feel the weight of what she had given up. When they finally pulled apart, Cale wiped his face again. I have a lot of questions. I know. Are you going to answer them? Some of them. That is not good enough. It is going to have to be. Cale looked like he wanted to argue, but then someone called his name. One of the other graduates was waving him over for a group photo. Cale glanced back at Reeve. Go, she said. This is your day. We can talk later. He hesitated, then nodded. He started to walk away, then stopped and turned back. Mom, she looked at him. I am glad you came. Reeve felt her throat tighten, but she managed a small smile. So am I. Cale walked back to his friends, and Reeve watched as they pulled him into the group, laughing and clapping him on the back. He looked over his shoulder at her once, then turned his attention back to the camera. Reeve stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked back toward her truck. But this time, she did not leave. She sat in the driver's seat with the windows down, listening to the sounds of the celebration, and waited. An hour later, when the crowd had mostly dispersed and the ceremony staff was breaking down the chairs, Cale appeared at her window again. He had changed out of his dress whites and into jeans and a navy shirt. He looked younger in civilian clothes. Can I buy you lunch? He said. Reeve looked at him. You do not have to do that. I know, but I want to. She nodded. All right. They drove separately to a diner near the base, the kind of place that had been there for decades and served breakfast all day. They sat in a booth by the window. Cale ordered a burger. Reeve ordered coffee and toast. When the food came, Cale did not eat right away. He just looked at her. "I do not know where to start," he said. Reeve took a sip of her coffee. Then, "Do not start anywhere. Just ask what you want to ask." Cale nodded. He thought for a moment. "The Admiral said you were declared dead in 2009. Where were you? Not in Kandahar. Where then?" Reeve set her coffee down. "I cannot tell you that. Cannot or will not. Both." Cale frowned. "Is it still classified?" "Yes." "Will it ever not be?" "Probably not." Cale leaned back in the booth. "So, I am just supposed to accept that my mom was part of some secret unit that does not officially exist. And I will never know what she actually did. Yes. That is not fair?" Reeve looked at him steadily. "No, it is not." Cale stared at her, then let out a frustrated breath. "Fine. Then tell me this. The tattoo, the one the Admiral saw, what does it mean?" Reeve was silent for a long moment. Then she reached up and pulled the collar of her shirt to the side, exposing the full mark. It was an inverted trident, smaller than the SEAL trident, with sharper lines. Beneath it were 4 hash marks, and along the curve of the trident, 4 names in tiny, precise script: Kess, Torin, Brack, Yael. Cale stared at it. "Those are people. Yes, your team. Yes. What happened to them? They did not make it out of Kandahar." Cale's face went pale. "You were supposed to be there. I was, but you were not." Reeve pulled her collar back into place. "I was extracted early. They stayed to finish the mission. Why? Because someone had to." Cale's voice dropped. "And they all died." "Yes." Reeve's hand went to the edge of the table, gripping it hard enough that her knuckles turned white. "And you carry their names. Every day." Cale looked like he wanted to say something, but he did not. He just stared at the table, processing. After a long silence, he spoke again. "The Admiral called you one of the most decorated operators in SEAL history, but you were never a SEAL." "No." "Then what were you?" Reeve took another sip of coffee. "Something they did not have a name for." "That is not an answer. It is the only one I have." Cale shook his head. "This is impossible. I feel like I am talking to a stranger." "You are," Reeve said quietly. "The person I was when I served is not the person sitting in front of you. Then who is sitting in front of me?" "Your mother." Cale looked at her for a long time. Then he picked up his burger and took a bite. They ate in silence for a while. When they finished, Cale paid the check and they walked outside. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the parking lot. "Are you going to stay in San Diego?" Cale asked. "For a few days. Where are you staying?" "A motel off the highway." Cale frowned. "You can stay with me. I have a place off base." Reeve shook her head. "I will be fine." "Mom?" She looked at him. "Stay with me. Please." Reeve hesitated, then nodded. "All right." They drove to his apartment, a small 1-bedroom, in a complex that looked like every other military housing complex in Southern California. Cale unlocked the door and gestured her inside. It was sparse: a couch, a TV, a small kitchen table. Everything was clean and organized in the way that comes from military discipline. "You can take the bed," Cale said. "I will sleep on the couch. I am not taking your bed." "Mom?" "Cale." They stared at each other, and then Cale smiled. It was the first real smile Reeve had seen from him all day. "You are stubborn," he said. "I know. I get that from you. I know." They both slept poorly that night. Reeve lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of Cale moving in the other room. At some point, she heard him get up and go to the kitchen. She heard the fridge open, heard him pour water. She thought about getting up, about saying something, but she did not. In the morning, Cale made coffee, and they sat at the small kitchen table. The light coming through the window was pale and soft. "I looked you up last night," Cale said. Reeve raised an eyebrow. And there is nothing. No service record, no social media, no address history. It is like you did not exist before I was born. That was the point." Cale set his coffee down. "How did you do that? How did you just erase yourself?" Reeve did not answer. "Mom, some things are better left alone. I do not accept that. You do not have to." They sat in silence. Then Cale leaned forward. One more question. Reeve waited. Do you regret it? Any of it? Reeve looked at him, at his face, at the person he had become without her guidance. No, she said, I do not. Even staying away from me. Especially that. Cale's face twisted, and Reeve realized too late how that sounded. Because it kept you safe, she added quickly. Because it let you grow up without a target on your back. Because it gave you a chance at a normal life. But I did not have a normal life, Cale said. I had a mom who was never there. Reeve felt the words like a physical blow, but she did not look away. I know, she said, and I am sorry. Cale stared at her. Then he stood up and walked to the window. He stood there with his back to her, his shoulders tense. After a long moment, he spoke. I joined the Navy because I wanted to understand you. I thought if I did what you did, maybe I would figure out why you were the way you were. Reeve's chest tightened. And now I know, Cale continued, and I still do not understand. He turned around, and Reeve saw that his eyes were wet again. But I want to, he said. I want to try. Reeve stood. She walked over to him and put her hand on his shoulder. Then we will try, she said. They stood there for a moment, and then Cale pulled her into another hug. This one was less awkward, more certain. When they pulled apart, Cale wiped his face. I have to report to my new unit next week. Where? Virginia Beach. Reeve nodded. That is a good posting. Will you visit? Reeve hesitated. Then she nodded. Yes, promise. I promise. Cale smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. They spent the rest of the morning talking, not about Wraith, not about Kandahar, just about small things, about Cale's training, about the friends he had made, about the instructor who had nearly dropped him for insubordination during Hell Week. Reeve listened, and for the first time in years, she let herself be present. That afternoon, as she was getting ready to leave, Cale handed her something, a small photo taken at the ceremony. It was a shot of the formation, all 47 graduates standing at attention. I thought you might want it, he said. Reeve looked at the photo. Then she looked at him. Thank you, she said. She put it in her purse, said goodbye, and walked out to her truck. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Cale standing in the doorway, watching her go. She did not disappear this time. She drove back to the motel, packed her things, and checked out. But instead of heading home, she drove to the naval base. She parked outside the gate and sat there for a long time, staring at the ceremony grounds through the chain-link fence. The chairs were gone now. The stage had been disassembled. The only thing left was the empty parade deck and the flag snapping in the wind. Reeve pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found a number she had not called in years. She stared at it for a long time, then she pressed call. It rang 3 times before someone picked up. A man's voice, rough and cautious. Who is this? Reeve took a breath. It is Reeve. Silence on the other end, then, in a voice barely above a whisper, that is not possible. It is, Reeve said, and I need to talk. There was a long pause, then the man said, Where are you? San Diego. Stay there. I will come to you. The line went dead. Reeve sat in the truck, staring at the empty parade deck, and waited. If someone you know has ever carried a secret too heavy to share, leave a comment about how truth changes everything. And if stories like this one matter to you, subscribing helps us keep telling them. The man arrived 3 hours later. Reeve was still sitting in her truck outside the base when a black sedan pulled up beside her. The driver's side door opened and a figure stepped out, moving with the kind of controlled precision that comes from decades of training that never fully leaves the body. He was in his late 50s, gray at the temples, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone and then weathered by wind. He wore jeans and a plain jacket, nothing that would draw attention. But there was something about the way he carried himself that made it clear he was not ordinary. He walked to Reeve's window and tapped on the glass. She rolled it down. Garrick, she said. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he shook his head slowly. I went to your funeral. I know. I carried your casket. I know. There was nothing in it. I know. Garrick let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for 16 years. Get out of the truck. Reeve climbed out. They stood facing each other in the parking lot, the sun setting behind them, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Why now? Garrick said. After all this time. Why surface now? Reeve glanced toward the base. My son graduated today, from Bud/S. Garrick's eyes widened. You have a son? Yes. And he joined the Navy? Yes. Garrick rubbed his face with both hands. Does he know? He does now. How? Admiral Torch recognized me, at the ceremony. Garrick went still. Torch was there. He was the reviewing officer. And he saw you. Yes. Garrick cursed under his breath. He turned away, pacing a few steps, then turned. Back. Do you have any idea what you have just done? Reeve met his eyes. Yes. The unit was burned, Reeve. Wraith does not exist. You do not exist. That was the deal? That was how you stayed alive. I know. Then why would you risk it? Why would you put yourself in a position where someone like Torch could see you? Because my son asked me to be there, Reeve said quietly, and I have spent 16 years staying away from him. I could not do it anymore. Garrick stared at her. Then he let out a long breath and leaned against the side of her truck. You always were stubborn. That has not changed. They stood in silence for a moment. The traffic on the distant highway created a low hum. A helicopter passed overhead, its rotors cutting through the evening air. The others, Garrick said finally. Kess, Torin, Brack, Yael. You still carry them, every day. It was not your fault. Reeve looked away. I was extracted. They were not. Because the mission parameters changed. Because Intel said the site was compromised. You followed orders. And they died. Garrick shook his head. They died doing what we all signed up to do. You do not get to carry that like it was your choice. Reeve did not respond. The weight of those names tattooed along her collarbone felt heavier in this moment than it had in years. Garrick studied her face. You have been alone this whole time. Yes. No contact with anyone from the unit. There was no one left to contact. I am still here. You were supposed to think I was dead. And now I know you are not. So, what happens next? Reeve turned to look at him. I do not know, but I am done hiding. Garrick was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. All right. Then we do this the right way. You are going to need cover. You are going to need documentation. And you are going to need someone who can run interference if the wrong people start asking questions. You would do that? Garrick smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. You saved my life in Mosul. I think I owe you. That was a long time ago. Some debts do not expire. Reeve felt something loosen in her chest. Thank you. Garrick pushed off the truck. I will make some calls. In the meantime, you need to keep a low profile. No more ceremonies. No more public appearances. If Torch recognized you, others might too. Understood. And Reeve. She looked at him. It is good to see you alive. She nodded. You too. Garrick got back in his car and drove away. Reeve stood in the parking lot for a few minutes longer, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue. Streetlights flickered on across the base. She got back in her truck and drove to the motel. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Her phone sat on the nightstand, silent. She thought about calling Cale, but she did not know what she would say. The distance between who she had been and who she was now felt like an ocean she did not know how to cross. Instead, she thought about Kandahar, about the mission that had taken 4 lives and left her with a name that no longer existed, about the choices she had made and the ones that had been made for her. She thought about the moment she had been pulled from the field, the helicopter lifting off while her team stayed behind. She thought about the radio chatter, the sound of gunfire, the final transmission that came through before the line went dead. Kess had been the last one on comms, his voice calm even as chaos erupted around him. Target secured. We are holding position. Get her out. And she had gone. Because those were the orders. Because someone had decided her extraction was more valuable than their lives. She thought about the memorial service she had not attended, about the closed caskets, about the families who had been told their loved ones died in a training accident because the truth was too classified to share. And she thought about Cale, about the way he had looked at her today, the way his face had crumpled when he realized who she was, the way he had asked why she never told him, as if there had been any way to explain. She had given up 16 years with him to keep him safe, And now that he knew the truth, she did not know if those years had been worth it. Sleep came in fragments. When morning finally arrived, she felt hollowed out. She checked out of the motel and drove back to Cale's apartment. He answered the door in running shorts and a navy shirt, sweating like he had just finished a workout. "You came back," he said. "I said I would." He stepped aside to let her in. "I did not think you would." Reeves set her bag down by the door. "I keep my promises." Cale nodded. He grabbed a towel and wiped his face. "Do you want coffee?" "Please." They sat at the kitchen table again. This time, the silence between them was less heavy, but still carried weight. Cale poured 2 cups and set one in front of her. "I talked to some of the other guys last night," Cale said, "about what happened at the ceremony. A few of them recognized the name, Task Unit Wraith." Reeve looked at him. What did they say? That it was a ghost story. That it was something instructors talked about to scare recruits. That no one really knew if it was real. It was real. "I know that now." Cale took a sip of his coffee. One of the guys said his uncle served in Afghanistan in 2009. He said there was a mission that went bad, that a whole team was killed. He said the military covered it up because it was too sensitive. Reeves' grip tightened on her mug. "Was that your team?" Cale asked. "Yes." "What happened?" Reeves set her mug down. "I cannot tell you the details, but I can tell you this. We were sent in to extract a high-value target, someone who had intelligence that could save American lives. The mission was supposed to be quick, in and out, but it was not. No. We were compromised before we even reached the target. Someone leaked our position. By the time we realized what was happening, we were surrounded." Cale leaned forward. "And you got out." "I was pulled out," Reeves said. "Command made the call. They said the mission was over. They sent a helicopter for me, but not for the others." Reeves' jaw tightened. There was not enough time. They stayed to cover the extraction, to make sure the helicopter got out. "And they died." "Yes." Cale was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "That is why you carry their names." "Yes." "Do their families know what really happened?" "No. They were told it was a training accident. That is not right." "No," Reeves said. "It is not. But that is how it works." Cale shook his head. "I do not know if I can accept that. You do not have to accept it, but you have to understand it. There are things that happen in the field that cannot be made public, not because the military wants to hide mistakes, but because revealing the truth would put more lives at risk." Cale stared at her. "Do you believe that?" "I have to." They sat in silence. Then Cale stood and walked to the window. He stared out at the parking lot for a long time before speaking again. Outside, a group of young sailors walked past, laughing about something. Normal, easy. "I do not know how to reconcile this," he said. "The mom I knew growing up and the person the Admiral described. They do not fit together. They are the same person," Reeves said. "Just different parts. How do I know which part is real?" Reeves stood and walked over to him. "Both parts are real. The operator who ran classified missions is real. The mother who stayed away to keep you safe is real. They are not separate. They are both me." Cale turned to look at her. His eyes were red again. "I wish you had told me sooner. I could not." "I know, but I still wish you had." Reeve reached out and put her hand on his shoulder. "So do I." They stood there for a moment, and then Cale pulled her into a hug. This time, it felt easier, more natural, like they were learning how to be around each other without the walls. When they pulled apart, Cale wiped his eyes. What happens now? Reeve thought about Garrick, about the calls he was making, about the cover he was building. "I do not know yet, but I am not disappearing." "Good. And I am going to visit you in Virginia." "You better." They spent the rest of the day together. They went for a drive along the coast, stopping at a small beach where Cale used to go during training when he needed to clear his head. The sand was pale and fine, the water cold and clear. They walked along the shoreline, not saying much, just being present. At one point, Cale bent down and picked up a smooth stone. He turned it over in his hand, then threw it into the water. It skipped twice before sinking. "I used to come here and think about you," he said, "about why you were the way you were. I would try to imagine what your life was like before I was born. I always pictured something boring. Office work, like you said. Maybe accounting or something. Reeve smiled faintly. Not quite. No, not quite. They kept walking. The sun was setting again, casting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Gulls circled overhead, their cries sharp and clear. A few other people dotted the beach, couples walking hand in hand. A man throwing a ball for his dog. Tell me about them, Cale said suddenly. Who? Your team. The people you carry. Reeve was quiet for a long moment. Then she began to speak. Kess was the oldest, 42 when he died. He had 3 daughters. He used to carry their pictures in his vest pocket, wrapped in plastic to keep them dry. He was the best marksman I ever worked with. Could hit a target at 1,000 meters in a sandstorm. Cale listened without interrupting. Torin was the medic, 28, engaged to a girl from Minnesota. He was supposed to get married 6 months after we got back. He saved my life twice, once in Mosul when I took shrapnel to the leg, once in Kandahar when I got pinned down in a building. He pulled me out under fire. What happened to his fiancée? Cale asked quietly. I do not know. I was not allowed to contact her. Reeve paused, staring out at the water. Brack was the demo expert, 35, former Army Ranger. He could disarm any explosive device you put in front of him. He was also the funniest person I ever met, always cracking jokes even in the worst situations. He used to say that if you could not laugh in hell, you did not deserve to be there. And the last one, Yael, 26, youngest on the team. He was a communication specialist, spoke 4 languages. He had a photographic memory, could recite entire mission briefs word for word after hearing them once. He wanted to go to law school when he got out. He used to talk about it all the time. Reeve stopped walking. She stood at the edge of the water, letting the waves wash over her feet. They were good people, she said. They deserved better than what they got. Cale stood beside her. And you carry them. Every day. That is a heavy load. Yes. But you do not regret it. Reeve shook her head. No, if I did not carry them, no one would. They stood there for a while longer, watching the sun disappear below the horizon. Then they walked back to the truck and drove to Cale's apartment. When they got back, Cale made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and marinara from a jar, but it felt significant somehow, like they were building something new. He moved around the small kitchen with efficiency, the kind that comes from living alone and learning to take care of yourself. You learn to cook, Reeve said. Had to. The chow hall gets old fast. He plated the food, and they sat at the small table. For a while, they ate in comfortable silence. Then Cale said, Tell me about Dad. Reeve set her fork down. She had known this question would come eventually. What do you want to know? Anything. You never talked about him. Reeve took a breath. Your father was a good man. He was also an operator, Delta Force. We met during a joint training exercise in North Carolina. He was intense, focused, the kind of person who gave everything to the mission. Were you in love? Yes. What happened? Reeve looked at her plate. He died 6 months before you were born. Training accident in the mountains. Helicopter went down in bad weather. Cale was quiet. Did he know about me? Yes. I told him 2 weeks before the accident. He was excited, scared, but excited. Do I look like him? Reeve met his eyes. Yes. You have his jawline, his hands, the way you stand when you are thinking. Cale looked down at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. He would have been proud of you, Reeve said. You think so. I know so. They finished dinner and Cale turned on a movie, some action film that neither of them paid much attention to. Reeve sat on the couch, aware of how strange this felt, how normal. Halfway through the movie, Cale fell asleep, his head tilted back against the couch, his breathing slow and even. Reeve sat there watching him, and for the first time in 16 years, she let herself feel something other than distance. She let herself feel like a mother. The next morning, Garrett called. Reeve stepped outside to take the call, standing on the small balcony overlooking the parking lot. It is done, he said. I pulled some strings. You have a new service record. Honorable discharge, non-combat related. It will hold up to scrutiny as long as no one digs too deep. Thank you. You are going to need to be careful, Reeve. There are people who will not be happy that you surfaced. I know. And if they come looking, I cannot protect you. I am not asking you to." Garrick was quiet for a moment. "You always were the bravest person I knew, or the most stubborn. Maybe both." Reeves smiled. "Probably both." "There is something else," Garrick said. "I reached out to some contacts, people who worked adjacent to Wraith. They want to know if you would be willing to talk. Off the record, just to fill in some gaps about what really happened in Kandahar. No, Reeve, no, that stays buried." Garrick sighed. "All right, I figured you would say that. But the offer is there if you change your mind. I will not? Fair enough." After the call, Reeve went back inside. Cale was awake now, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes, just taking care of some things." He nodded. "When are you leaving?" "Tomorrow." Cale's face fell slightly, but he nodded again. "Okay, but I will visit, I promise. I know." That afternoon, Reeve drove back to the base one last time. She did not go inside. She just parked outside the gate and stared at the ceremony grounds. The chairs were long gone now, the stage dismantled, but she could still see it in her mind. The moment Admiral Torch had walked toward her, the moment everything had changed. She thought about the salute, about the way the entire formation had followed his lead, about the look on Cale's face when he realized who she was. She thought about the 16 years she had spent in the shadows, trying to keep him safe, and she thought about the choice she had made to step into the light. It had been the right choice, even with all the complications, even with all the risk. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to the photo Cale had given her, the one of the formation. 47 men standing at attention, her son among them. She stared at it for a long time, then set the phone down. She started the truck and drove away. The next morning, she said goodbye to Cale. He walked her to her truck and hugged her one more time. This hug lasted longer than the others, like neither of them wanted to let go. "Drive safe," he said. "I will." "And Mom." She looked at him. "Thank you for coming to the ceremony." Reeve felt her throat tighten. "Thank you for asking me." She climbed into the truck and started the engine. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she looked in the rearview mirror and saw Cale standing there, watching her go. He raised his hand in a small wave. This time, she did not feel like she was running. She felt like she was moving forward. She drove north, back toward the small town where she had lived for the past 16 years. The place where no one knew who she was. The place where she had built a quiet, unremarkable life. But as she drove, she realized that life was over now. She was no longer invisible, and she was okay with that. When she got home, she parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, staring at the small house she had bought with cash years ago. It was plain, nondescript, the kind of place that blended into the background. A single-story ranch with faded blue siding and a small yard that she kept neat but not decorated. She got out and walked inside. The house was exactly as she had left it, clean, organized, empty in a way that had nothing to do with furniture. She set her bag down and walked to the bedroom. On the dresser was a small wooden box. She opened it and pulled out the 4 metal tags from her keychain. Kess, Torin, Brack, Yael. She held them in her hand, feeling their weight. The metal was smooth from years of handling. She had touched these tags every single day for 16 years. A ritual, a remembrance. "I am done hiding," she said quietly. "I do not know if you can hear me, but I am done." She put the tags back in the box and closed it gently. That night, she sat on the back porch and watched the stars. The air was cool and still. The only sound was the distant hum of the highway and the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. She wrapped herself in an old blanket and let the quiet settle around her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Cale. "Made it to Virginia. New unit is good. Miss you already." Reeve smiled. She typed back. "Miss you too. Proud of you." She sent it and set the phone down. For the first time in 16 years, she felt something that resembled peace, not complete, not without its shadows, but real. The weeks that followed were strange. People in town started recognizing her, not because they knew who she was, but because the story had gotten out. A local news station had picked it up, then a national one. The headline was always some variation of the same thing. "Ghost operator surfaces after 16 years." legendary SEAL team member revealed at son's graduation, the woman who was declared dead. Reeve did not do interviews, she did not respond to requests, she just went about her life, and eventually the attention began to fade. But some things changed. The clerk at the grocery store, a young woman named Emma, who had always been friendly but distant, started thanking her for her service every time she checked out. An older veteran at the hardware store, a man named Dutch who had served in Vietnam, shook her hand one day and told her his son had served in Afghanistan. He said he understood what it meant to carry ghosts. A woman at the post office asked if she was the one from the ceremony. Reeve had nodded politely, but did not elaborate. The woman had smiled and said her nephew was in the army, that she prayed for people like Reeve every night. Reeve answered politely, but did not elaborate on any of it. She kept her responses short, kind, but distant, the way she had learned to be. Cale called every week. Sometimes they talked for hours, sometimes just a few minutes. But the distance between them was shrinking with each conversation. One night, he called and said, "I told my commanding officer about you." Reeve tensed. What did he say? He said you were a legend. He said he had heard stories about Wraith but thought they were exaggerated. What did you tell him? That they probably were not. Cale laughed. He said, "If I am half as good as you, I will be fine." Reeve smiled. "You will be better." "I do not know about that." "I do." They talked for a while longer. Cale told her about his training schedule, about a difficult exercise they had run in the mountains, about a teammate who reminded him of someone she might have known. He was careful not to share classified details, but Reeve could read between the lines. She knew what he was really telling her. When they hung up, Reeve felt lighter than she had in years. 3 months after the ceremony, Reeve got a package in the mail. No return address, just her name and address written in neat block letters that she recognized immediately. She opened it carefully, sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of tea cooling beside her. Inside was a single photograph. It was old, faded at the edges. It showed 5 people in tactical gear, faces partially obscured by shadows and the angle of the shot. But Reeve recognized them immediately. Kess, Torin, Brack, Yael, and herself. It was taken before the mission, before everything went wrong. They were standing in front of a transport helicopter, somewhere in the desert. Kess had his arms crossed. Torin was checking his med kit. Brack was grinning at something off camera. Yael was adjusting his comms gear, and Reeve stood slightly apart, scanning the horizon. There was a note tucked inside the package. It was unsigned, but Reeve recognized the handwriting. Garrick. The note said, "Thought you should have this. You carried them long enough. Let them rest." Reeve stared at the photograph for a long time. She studied each face, remembering their voices, their habits, the way they moved. Kess always checked his weapon 3 times before a mission. Torin hummed when he worked. Brack told terrible jokes. Yael quoted poetry in 4 different languages. She walked to the wooden box on her dresser and placed the photo inside, next to the 4 metal tags. She closed the box and stepped back. "Let them rest," she said quietly, "but I will not forget." 6 months after the ceremony, Reeve drove to Virginia Beach. It was a long drive, nearly 10 hours, but she wanted the time to think. She stopped at a rest area halfway there and bought terrible coffee from a vending machine. She stood outside in the cold, watching other travelers come and go, and felt like a ghost moving through the world. Cale met her at his apartment. He had moved since she last visited, to a place closer to the base. It was bigger, nicer. He was doing well. He took her to meet some of his teammates. They gathered at a local bar that was popular with military personnel. The walls were covered with unit patches and photographs. The air smelled like beer and fried food. The teammates were polite, respectful, but she could see the curiosity in their eyes. They knew who she was, or at least they knew the stories. One of them, a young lieutenant named Hayes with a fresh haircut and nervous energy, pulled Cale aside at one point. Reeve saw them talking near the pool table, saw the way Hayes kept glancing at her. Later, Cale told her what Hayes had said. He asked if you were really part of Wraith. I told him yes. What did he say? He said that if the stories are true, you are one of the most dangerous people he has ever met. Reeve raised an eyebrow. And what did you say? I said he was probably right. They both laughed. That night, they sat on Cale's balcony overlooking the ocean. The sound of the waves was steady, rhythmic. The air smelled like salt. Lights from other buildings dotted the darkness. "I am glad you came," Cale said. "So am I. Do you think you will ever talk about it? About what you did?" Reeve shook her head. "No. Some things are better left in the past, even if people want to know. Especially then." Cale nodded. He understood now in a way he had not before. They sat in silence for a while. Then Cale spoke again. "I have been thinking about something." "What?" "About why you stayed away. About why you kept your distance. And I think I get it now. You were not trying to hurt me. You were trying to protect me." "Yes. And I think that took more strength than anything you did in the field." Reeve looked at him, surprised. "Because it is easy to fight an enemy you can see," Cale continued. "But it is hard to fight yourself. To stay away from someone you love because you know it is the right thing to do. That is harder than any mission." Reeve felt tears prick at her eyes, but she did not look away. "Thank you," she said quietly. Cale reached over and took her hand. "You do not have to thank me. You are my mom. I am just glad I finally get to know you." They sat there for a long time, holding hands, watching the ocean. The waves rolled in endlessly, constant and unchanging. Reeve thought about all the years she had spent hiding, all the years she had spent alone, and she thought about how different things felt now. A year after the ceremony, Admiral Torch reached out. He sent an email through an encrypted channel that Garrick had set up for her. The email was brief. "Would you be willing to speak at a private event for senior officers? Nothing public, just a small gathering. Your story matters." Reeve read the email 3 times, then she wrote back, "No, but thank you for asking." She hit send and closed her laptop. But 2 weeks later, Torch reached out again, this time asking if she would be willing to meet for coffee, just to talk. No agenda, Reeve agreed. They met at a quiet cafe near the base. Torch looked older than he had at the ceremony, the weight of command evident in the lines on his face. He wore civilian clothes, jeans, and a button-down shirt, but he still carried himself like an officer. "How have you been?" he asked. "Good. Quiet." Torch nodded. "I am glad." They talked for a while about nothing in particular. About the weather, about the state of the Navy, about changes in training protocols, safe topics. Then Torch leaned forward. "I need to ask you something," he said. "And you do not have to answer. All right? Kandahar, what really happened?" Reeve was silent for a long time. She looked at her coffee, at the people moving past the window, at anything but his face. Then she said, "We were set up. Someone leaked our position. By the time we realized it, it was too late. And your team. They stayed behind so I could get out." Torch nodded slowly. "That must have been hard. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Do you regret it?" Reeve met his eyes. "Every day. But you would make the same choice again." "Yes." Torch leaned back. "I am sorry. For what it is worth, I am sorry. Thank you." They finished their coffee and said goodbye. As Reeve walked to her truck, Torch called after her, "Reeve." She turned. "For what it is worth," he said, "I think you made the right call. Coming to the ceremony, letting your son know who you are. That took courage." Reeve nodded. Then she got in her truck and drove away. 2 years after the ceremony, Cale called with news. His voice was different, more serious. "I am getting deployed," he said. "Where? I cannot tell you." Reeve felt her chest tighten. "When?" 2 months. Are you ready?" "I think so." They talked for a while longer, and when they hung up, Reeve sat in silence. She stared at the wall of her living room, at the single photograph she had hung there, the one from the ceremony, Cale in his dress whites, standing at attention. She thought about all the things she wanted to say to him, all the warnings she wanted to give, but she knew he would not listen. He was his own person now. He had made his own choices, just like she had. All she could do was trust that she had prepared him as best she could. The night before Cale deployed, Reeve drove to Virginia Beach. She made the trip in 8 hours, stopping only once for gas and a bathroom break. She arrived at his apartment just after sunset. They had dinner together, just the two of them. Cale cooked steaks on a small grill on his balcony. They ate outside, watching the lights of the city come on one by one. Are you scared? Reeve asked. A little. That is normal. Were you ever scared? Reeve smiled. Every time, but you still went. Yes. Why? Because someone had to. Cale nodded. He cut into his steak. I understand that now. After dinner, they walked along the beach. The moon was full, casting silver light across the water. The sand was cool beneath their feet. A few other people dotted the shoreline, but they kept their distance. I want you to know something, Cale said. What? I am proud of you. Reeve stopped walking. She turned to look at him. I know you think you failed, Cale continued. I know you carry guilt about your team, but you did not fail. You survived, and you kept going, and that matters. Reeve felt tears spill over, and this time she did not try to stop them. Thank you, she said. Cale hugged her, and they stood there on the beach for a long time. The waves rolled in around their feet. The moon cast their shadows long across the sand. When they finally pulled apart, Cale wiped his eyes. I will come back, he said. I know. Promise. I promise. They walked back to his apartment in silence. Reeve stayed the night, sleeping on his couch. She lay awake for hours, listening to the sound of him moving in the next room. At one point, she heard him get up and walk to the window. She heard him stand there for a long time before going back to bed. When Cale deployed, Reeve went back to her quiet life. She worked at the hardware store 3 days a week. She went to the grocery store on Thursdays. She kept her yard neat. She lived. But every night she thought about him. She thought about the dangers he was facing, the choices he was making, the weight he was carrying, and she prayed that he would come home. She did not pray often, but she prayed for him. 6 months later, he did. He called her from the airport. I am back. Reeve felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight for months. Are you okay? I am fine. Can I come see you? Yes. He arrived 2 days later. He looked thinner, older. There were lines around his eyes that had not been there before, but he was smiling. They sat on the back porch and talked for hours. He told her about the deployment, about the things he could share and the things he could not. He told her about a close call during a night operation, about a teammate who had saved his life, about the feeling of the helicopter lifting off at the end, carrying him home. And then he said, I understand now. Understand what? Why you did what you did. Why you stayed away. I get it now. Reeve looked at him. And do you forgive me? Cale smiled. There is nothing to forgive. They sat in silence, watching the stars come out, one by one. The night was clear and cold. Reeve wrapped herself in a blanket. Cale leaned back in his chair, his eyes half closed. I am thinking about getting out, he said after a while. Reeve looked at him. Out of the Navy. Yeah. I did my time. I served. But I do not know if I want to keep doing this. What would you do instead? I do not know. Maybe go to school, maybe teach. I have not figured it out yet. Reeve nodded. Whatever you decide, I will support you. Cale looked at her. Even if I leave, especially if you leave. They sat there for a while longer. Then Cale said, Do you ever regret it? Serving. Reeve thought about the question, about Kandahar, about the years she spent in shadows, about the cost. No, she said finally. I do not regret serving. I regret what I lost, but I do not regret the choice, even losing all those years with me. Reeve met his eyes, especially those years, because losing them kept you safe, and that was worth everything. Cale's eyes filled with tears, but he smiled. You are something else. You know that. I have been told. They both laughed, and for the first time in 16 years, Reeve felt whole. 3 years after the ceremony, Reeve got a call from Garrick. She had not heard from him in months. I have news, he said. What kind of news? The kind you need to hear in person. He drove up the next day. They met at a diner on the edge of town, the same one she had taken Cale to years ago. Garrick slid into the booth across from her. He looked tired. They found him, he said. Who? The leak. The one who compromised Kandahar. Reeve went still. He was CIA, selling intel to the highest bidder. He has been doing it for years. They finally caught him. Reeve did not speak. He is the reason your team died. He is the reason Wraith was burned. Reeve stared at her coffee. I thought you should know, Garrick said. Does it change anything? No. Then why tell me? Because you deserve to know. Because they deserve to have someone know the truth. Reeve nodded slowly. Thank you. They sat in silence for a while. Then Garrick said, "Are you okay?" "I will be." When Garrick left, Reeves sat in the booth for another hour. She stared out the window at the parking lot, at the cars coming and going, at the ordinary flow of life. She thought about Kess and Torin and Brack and Yael, about the fact that their deaths had not been random, that someone had sold them out for money. She thought about the anger she should feel, the rage, but all she felt was tired. That night, she opened the wooden box on her dresser. She looked at the photograph, at the 4 metal tags, at the evidence of lives cut short, and then she closed the box and put it away. 4 years after the ceremony, Cale got married. He had left the Navy and gone back to school. He was studying education, planning to teach history. He had met a woman named Claire, a nurse who worked at the VA hospital. She was kind and patient and understood what it meant to love someone who carried scars. The wedding was small, just family and a few close friends. Reeves sat in the front row and watched her son say his vows. She watched the way he looked at Claire, the way he smiled, and she thought about all the years she had missed, all the moments she had given up. But she also thought about the fact that he was here, that he was whole, that he was happy, and she knew she had made the right choice. At the reception, Cale asked her to dance. They moved slowly across the floor, neither of them particularly good at it. "Thank you for being here," he said. "I would not have missed it. I mean it. Thank you for everything." Reeve looked up at him. "You do not have to thank me." "Yes, I do. You gave up everything for me, and I did not even know it. You were worth it." Cale pulled her closer. "I love you, Mom." Reeve felt tears slip down her face. "I love you too." 5 years after the ceremony, Reeve got a letter. It came in a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was shaky but legible. "My name is Margaret Torrance. You do not know me, but my son was Kess Torrance. He died in 2009. The military told me it was a training accident. I never believed them. Someone sent me an article about you, about the ceremony, about Task Unit Wraith. I just wanted to say thank you for carrying him, for remembering him. He used to talk about his team. He said you were the best operator he had ever worked with. He said you saved his life more than once. I do not know if that is true, but I know he respected you. So, thank you for being there, for making sure he was not forgotten." Reeve read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the wooden box with the photograph and the tags. She sat on the edge of her bed and cried. Not from sadness, but from something deeper, something like release. 6 years after the ceremony, Reeve received a call from Admiral Torch. He was retiring. He wanted to know if she would come to the ceremony. "I do not do ceremonies," she said. "I know. But this one is different. I am putting names on a memorial, names that have been classified for too long. Your team, Wraith. I want to honor them properly." Reeve was silent. "You do not have to speak," Torch said. "You do not have to do anything. Just be there." She thought about it for a long time. Then she said, "I will be there." The ceremony was held at the Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, the same place where Cale had graduated 6 years earlier. Reeve stood in the back again. But this time, she was not alone. Cale stood beside her. Claire stood on his other side, holding his hand. Admiral Torch gave a speech about sacrifice, about the operators who gave everything in the shadows, about the missions that would never be declassified, but that mattered just as much as the ones that made headlines. And then he unveiled the memorial. 4 names carved into black granite. Kess Torrance, Torin McVeigh, Brack Holloman, Yael Nadir. Reeve stared at the names. She felt Cale's hand on her shoulder. "They are not forgotten," he whispered. "No," Reeve said, "they are not." After the ceremony, people came up to her. Veterans, officers, families of other fallen operators. They thanked her. They told her their stories. They asked about her service. Reeve answered what she could. She was polite, present, but she did not stay long. She walked back to her truck with Cale and Claire. They stood in the parking lot for a moment, the 3 of them, looking back at the memorial. "Are you okay?" Claire asked. Reeve nodded. "I am." She got in her truck and started the engine. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The memorial stood in the sunlight, the names clear and permanent, and Reeve knew that she had finally let them rest. 7 years after the ceremony, Reeve woke up one morning and realized she was happy. Not in a loud way, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a quiet, steady way that felt like coming home. She had coffee on the back porch. She watched the birds. She thought about the life she had built, the life she was still building. Her phone rang. It was Kale. "Hey, Mom. Hey. Just wanted to call and say hi. Claire and I are thinking about visiting next month. Is that okay?" "Of course." "Good. And, Mom?" "Yeah, I am proud of you." Reeve smiled. "I am proud of you, too." When they hung up, Reeve sat for a while longer. The sun was warm on her face. The world felt quiet and good. She thought about the woman she had been, the operator, the ghost, the person who carried names and scars and silence. She thought about the woman she was now, the mother, the person who had learned to step into the light, and she realized that both versions were true, both versions mattered. She stood and walked inside. She had work to do, a life to live, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, she was not running from it. If you know someone who has ever carried a weight they could never fully share, or if you have watched someone quietly sacrifice everything for the people they love, leave a comment about what strength really looks like. And if stories like this remind you that courage does not always come with recognition, consider subscribing so we can keep honoring the people whose sacrifices often go unseen but never unfelt.